So you guys just moved out to CR.
We did, yeah.
How are you liking it out there?
It's pretty plush, really, considering what I've been used to this last decade or so. We were at Eureka High School, and thanks to Eureka High School for being our host for these many years, but they decided to go another way. And
Yeah, feel free to move that around. I can turn the volume up.
yeah,
Down
give me a
too.
little more.
Little
Give me a
more?
little more me.
Tell me when that starts.
Check a 1 and 2, 3. That's great. Thank you. So yeah, they decided that they'd come to the end of the road with us, and so we found that out about a year and a half ago, and so we started looking around for places to be, and we are fortunate enough to have Keith Flamer, who's the CR president, as a member of the Access Humboldt board. And he said, "Hey, we've got this building that they cannot make. It used to be the old administration building, but they can't, because of the earthquake standards have been upgraded. They can't make students go in there. They can't hold a class. They can't make you sign up for your classes there.
But they can let you guys go.
But they can let us go in there, and if people want to go in of their own volition, that's completely fine. But they can't mandate that any students go in there." So anyway, it is the old administration building, as I mentioned. It had the president's office in it, the boardroom for the CR board, which we're now using as our TV studio and control room. And it's just we're only occupying a portion of it. There's still a huge empty portion there. If anybody's looking for a place to be.
Are you guys planning to expand to fill out the room, or what's your setup there? Do you just have one set that everybody's going to record on?
Well, the thing about our old place at Access Humboldt at Eureka High School is it was a purpose-built media center, right? So we went out. It didn't cost the taxpayers anything. We went out and got a grant for that. I wasn't there at the time, but they went out and got a grant for that and built out a media center with a purpose-built television studio that had a grid, that you can fly your lights on. And
all the bells and whistles.
Yeah. So this place is not that. So we, are trying to recreate as best as possible. So we have a studio, which, like as I mentioned, was the old boardroom. We have a green screen set up on one side. We've got a limbo set up on the other side. And then, we've always run TriCasters. So we have a TriCaster set up in there with some PTZ cameras. We're kind of rebuilding that whole thing at our cameras and our gear at the moment. But it's just kind of that studio that we had at Eureka High on a smaller scale, without the lighting grid, obviously. So we're taking care of it with floor lamps and all that kind of stuff. But it's highly functional. It does what it needs to do. And, the beauty of being on the CR campus, there's a lot of beauty in being on the CR campus, not just this, but is that if we needed to do a production-sized production where we had an audience, which we've done in the past at our old facility, they have beautiful. I have a beautiful auditorium, two, in fact. One is not really in use, but they have a brand new auditorium. So we could just walk across the campus with our gear and set up and be in business in a very short period of time. So we really kind of got the best of all worlds, over there.
So you guys kind of have a skeleton set up in the sense that the lighting's not fully there yet. Are you planning to build that out?
Well, the lighting is there in that we have an RA kit, so that is a complete lighting kit. So it's a complete set of lights. You're not wanting for anything in there.
You have all the necessities.
Right. Now the idea would be to go to LEDs, and we have an LED kit, but it's just not big enough really to do everything you want to do. It's just got 3 lights instead of the 8 that the RA kit has in it. So. But we went ahead in that direction. So we went ahead in getting the LED, using less power, less heat, and especially in a small confined space. But really, we have everything you could want really to do. And I've done a couple of my own personal productions in there. I just finished up a video for some folks for Rotary. They're doing a thing about water, and I just finished filming the presenters in there. So the space is working. You know, it does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, it seems like CR would be the perfect spot for you guys.
You know, it really is.
The
You know,
location isn't quite as ideal as EHS. You're not centered in the community.
That's true. However, I mean, there is a bus line that pulls right up in front of the place. One of my coworkers took it from Eureka just to see, you know, if it's easy or hard or whatever, you know, and it was like 10 minutes, you know, from her bus stop to the CR bus stop. So, you know, it's on the south side of town. So you would either have to get in your car or take a bus to get down there. But, you know, I don't really feel like even at Eureka High, we had a huge amount of drop-ins, more pre-COVID. So you could talk about us pre-COVID and post-COVID. You know, a lot of things, as I'm sure you can appreciate, changed, you know, in the 2.5 years since COVID came on the scene, you know.
Did you guys lose programs as a result of COVID, or it was just trying to get people into the studio to create something?
We did lose programs. We just, you know, people were just not, you know, venturing out and going to events, because a lot of our programming that was submitted by members was event-based, so lectures or music events or, you know, things that involved a lot of people getting together. And so once, you know, people stopped getting together, then people stopped making videos. Not completely. We actually got some new people, sort of some new blood in the COVID era, which are really some really fabulous stuff. But yeah, we saw a huge drop off in member submitted videos. And, you know, I tried to, and to a certain extent succeeded in bringing a bunch of homegrown content, you know, to kind of fill out our day. And so we developed a number of programs, 4 programs, in fact, that, you know, I kind of took it upon myself to, like, you know, kind of, you know, we had an empty vessel, you know, and I'd fill it up with some stuff, you know. But that's been a great thing ongoing, just because of what the programs are and who's involved and all that kind of stuff. So, and it has started to come back now that you know, COVID's kind of easing off a little bit.
People are a little more comfortable.
Going out. But I mean, here's an appeal to your listeners: if you've got some video sitting on your hard drive somewhere and you want to share it with the rest of Humboldt County, all you got to do is go to accesshumboldt.net, and there's a submit page, a submit link. You don't even have to get up out of your chair. If it's on YouTube, we'll rip it from YouTube and put it on. And for the television side, we don't pre-screen things, so we don't do editorial control over what people put on.
So no content moderation.
No content moderation. It's the only way that we could. It's called prior restraint. So it's the only way that we can operate as a community media center on the television side, is that we don't look at it. You know.
Does that get you into trouble? What if people start releasing some crazy stuff?
Well, I wouldn't want to characterize anything that we get at Access Humboldt. We have had some unusual content in the past from people, but really, what the parameters are just the you know, you don't want to slander, libel anybody. You don't want to you know, it that's kind of really it. I mean, copywritten material is another kind of no-go area. There's a third one that's escaping me at the moment.
I would assume profanity is probably up there as well.
No.
Really?
No. We do not, you know, nudity, profanity, that's all fine.
Even for broadcasting on television?
Well, that's the thing. See, it's not broadcast on television. It is cablecast. So I guess I should back up and say we have 4 channels on the Suddenlink cable system. We have Educate, Channel 8, which is ostensibly an educational channel. We have Civic 10, which is civic meetings. So Board of Supervisors, Eureka City Council, you name it, Arcata City Council, all the councils, all the major boards are on that. Then channel 11 and 12 are sort of our free-form channels. They had one was an experimental designation, but it's kind of, they've become overflow channels for a lot of the public meetings we do. But those two channels, 11 and 12, are where we will put member-submitted material. Now, I should hasten to add that you do not have to be a member of Access Humboldt to submit material to us. All you have to be is a resident of Humboldt County. And, so like I said, if people are listening to this and they say, well, I got, this shot of, the Timber Wars or whatever, that I would like to share with our cable audience, we'll take that. Now, as far as, say, nudity and profanity goes, we do observe safe harbor, right? So
Meaning?
Safe harbor is between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. So the idea of safe harbor is that kids are not up, watching television.
See something they shouldn't see.
See something they shouldn't see. Now, in the world that we live in, of course, it's
a different story.
It's kind of a ridiculous.
In the age of the internet.
Yeah, it's kind of a ridiculous when their smartphone, can bring them just about anything they want. It's kind of a ridiculous, outmoded concept, but there's a lot ridiculous and outmoded about us, so we stick to that. So we would put that material on later at night. And, the idea, of course, is that, say if something was graphically violent, you wouldn't want that to come on at the dinner time where people are sitting down having their dinner or what have you, so it's just kind of a conceit. But there really is no prohibition on it. I guess if it were straight porn, that
might be a different story.
Might be a different story. There's that whole thing about its obscenity, its community tastes, what the community will bear and support or throw away and reject, So sometimes there's kind of a fine line between that stuff. But honestly, we really don't have a lot of problems in those areas. I think the members of Access Humboldt and the people that submit to the channels are very conscientious, and they're very serious about what they're presenting, because they have to sign off on it. So this is the other thing, is that when they offer something up to the channels, they sign a form stating that they understand the terms and conditions, that it doesn't have the copyright, that it doesn't have the libel or slander in it, and if something goes wrong, well, it bounces off of us and sticks to you like glue, right? So that is the way, we handle it. And honestly, I can only think of one or two examples in the 11 years that I've been at Access Humboldt that we've really had anything going down. Oh, I know what the third thing is: non-commercial. So everything that goes on the channels needs to be of a non-commercial nature. You can't make a used car, commercial
Promo
for your brother-in-law or what have you. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't say, that it exists, but you couldn't say, you couldn't say we have the best tacos in town, come down, they're $2.99, sort of thing. You could say, you could do a piece, and people have done pieces in the past on restaurants and, maybe sort of a review sort of thing, but that's different than that call to action, where you're asking people to come down and buy what we're selling, So the non-commercial is the other nature. Now, let's say you were an author and you were doing a video on the topic that you wrote your book on. You could mention that you have a book. You could mention where, if you're interested in finding it, here's where you go. Here's my website, or here's a phone number. That's where you would go to get to find it. So instead of saying, here's my book, it's $39.95.
Yeah, call me directly.
Check or money order. I'll take all major credit cards. So that's kind of the third thing that I was trying to think of.
I think that's great in the sense that the limitations and the ease of access are there. you're not censored. You can kind of say whatever you want to say. You can do what you want to do. Put out whatever content you want to put out,
Mhm.
and there's no real overhead or oversight on that.
We somebody smarter than me called it a digital soapbox. And so Access Humboldt's been around since 2006, I think it is when we made our deal with the county and with Cox Communications at the time. And so much has happened. I don't have to tell you what's happened since 2006 in the revolution of smartphones.
It's a different world today.
Yeah, and the internet, of course, existed, but it wasn't the thing that it is today. And so that has involved us, kind of, reevaluating what our purpose is and how we can help people, realize what it is they're trying to realize, in a different way than it used to be when we had cameras for rent, which we still do. And that was, the only thing you could get really, you would either, buy a camcorder or, maybe have one or, something like that. Or you could use our gear, so in today's day and age, there are still people out there that, believe it or not, do not own a smartphone that still want to do stuff like this, but it's not the same sort of urgency, I would say, that we used to have in that department.
Would you guys say you're more of an aggregator of content today?
Well,
because in the past you had to go through the television because there was no internet.
Sure. When I hear the word aggregator, I think of something like Loco, that where they go out and they pull things and they bring them in, right? So they make a decision, right, to put things on their platform. We don't make those decisions. We're just a mindless jellyfish blob, like where the people put their stuff in. So we don't select. Other than the stuff that we produce on our own, we do not select things to put on the channel. So that's why I wouldn't call us an aggregator.
Yeah, I guess aggregator isn't the correct term. It would be you're more of a landing site for the content.
Yeah.
Just a place where it exists freely.
Yeah. We also maintain an archive, community media archive on archive.org. So that's another way of, I teach classes up there, and I get my students in, and I tell them, and like we were talking, I think maybe before we started about, you're doing video and stuff like that. You can make the best pancakes in the world, but if you make them at the bottom of the ocean, who's going to know about it, right? So you want to get it on as many different platforms as possible. Archive.org is a really cool organization. I don't know how familiar you are with them, but they, unlike YouTube, they don't, monetize your videos. YouTube, they do what they do, and that's great. But also, they can change their terms and conditions on a whim.
And pull content on a whim.
They could pull content. They could decide, okay, well, we're only taking 10-minute videos now, or which is what they started with. But they can change their private company. They can change their conditions. Whereas archive.org, you put it up on archive, it's going to be there for forever.
Is it a long-term archival site as well?
Yes.
Then? Okay.
Yeah. In fact, they run this thing called the Wayback Machine, which basically has websites from history. So you could go back and you could look at IBM's website from 1998.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's one of the things they do. They have this thing called the Prelinger Collection, which is all this public domain films. So if you wanted health films from the 60s and 70s, or just somebody's home movies that they've socked up there. But if you wanted or old movies that are out of they're no longer copywritten, or their copyright is expired, or nobody,
they're not in circulation
anymore. Where you can just go and pull that stuff off and use it any way you want to. You can cut it up and, mix it up and stuff. So, it's just a few of the things they do. They're just a really an amazing organization. So archive.org, another suggestion for your listeners is to check them out.
I'll have to look into them. I've not heard of that site.
Yeah. So we have that archive. We do have a YouTube channel. So we, things that, get submitted all, end up on YouTube as well, because again, we want to get it out there to all these different things, different spots that you possibly can. So the nice thing about the archive.org too is you can get an RSS feed and you can subscribe to it. Just like, you could if you were subscribing to somebody's, podcast from a commercial site, and that's all free, so a lot to recommend it.
Huh. That's cool that that's out there. I've not heard of that.
Check it out.
Yeah, I'll have to. I like that. Do they do any censorship? No. That's perfect.
Mm-mm. If they do, I'm not aware of it. I mean,
they're not as heavy-handed, at least, as YouTube.
I think they're kind of like us. I don't think they look at what the content is, right? If they got complaints about the content, they might.
Was that specific with Access Humboldt? Was that a choice not to censor, or was that a requirement in order to be this
It's
community?
a requirement to be. This is the way people that run public access television channels throughout the country, that's the way they all have to operate. Because if you would have to retain counsel. You would have to have somebody on staff that would review everything. There's just not enough hours in the day for our small staff to do that, or any small staff in a generally underfunded, community media center scenario.
It's not realistic.
No, it isn't. So it's kind of standard in the industry. Yeah.
And how did you find Access Humboldt? How did you come on board?
Well, I can go way back to being a communications major in college. I took radio and TV production. I was a DJ on the college radio station, so I had an interest in media back then. I took a number of detours into other careers as my got married and had kids and do all that kind of stuff. Had a mortgage, so I had to kind of. Pay the bills, have the day job. I was a musician. I was a recording engineer. I did a lot of crazy stuff in my life. But when I'll just say that I worked in the insurance industry for many years, and we specialized in home builders and remodeling contractors. So you can imagine, like right about 2008, what happened to that market.
Yeah, not a good time to be involved.
It disappeared. And honestly, by that time, I was pretty much done with it. It was nice to make good money and all that kind of stuff, but I never really felt at home in that industry. I don't play golf. I felt like that little imposter syndrome thing, even though we did well and it was fine. But anyway, I had been a Keat volunteer at the public television station here for a long time. I had probably been, by that point, I had probably been a volunteer for like 15 years or something like that. So I was very involved in the station. I did all the pledge drives. I did the auctions. I worked on, productions and things like that where they needed help. And so they needed a production assistant. One of the production assistants, Wes, was retiring, and they needed somebody. So I got hired as a production assistant. So I went to work for Key TV, and I was there for 3 years. Just to shorten this whole story, after about 3 years, things kind of came to an end there. And somebody said, "Hey, I see that Access Humboldt is hiring," and I knew about them. I had met Sean, and I'd been to their site, and was an admirer. I what they did. So I went down, and they interviewed me, and 2 weeks later, I was working for them. So that's where I started. So that was like 2012, 11, 12, somewhere in there. So that's how I got to Access Humboldt, and it's been a great ride. It's really been terrific. A lot of the things that I didn't feel like I was getting allowed to do up at Key TV, I got to do at Access Humboldt. I got to direct live television. I I got to found a radio station, or be a part of founding a radio station, which is not something that many people can claim in the world. And just working with a really dedicated crew of people, and feeling like, we were making a difference. A lot of what Access Humboldt does is support the nonprofit community. We work, with the DIY thing is important to us. So members doing their own thing and us giving them the guidance and the tools and all that sort of thing to do it is important. But we also work as a production company, so we get hired by nonprofits to realize the projects that they're doing. Right. So being involved in those things has really been rewarding. And we do education, so we do workshops, and we worked. We haven't really done them lately. COVID kind of put an end to a lot of that, but we work with a lot of kids that maybe never get a chance to do this kind of stuff. So we worked down in Lolita and down in Fortuna, and I'll tell you this story. It's going to sound really, I don't know, self-aggrandizing, maybe. I don't know. But I ran into a friend of mine who ran one of these centers, a youth center. Actually, it was a multi-generational center, but they had programs for youth. And we did a couple of workshops over the years down there, digital iOS workshops. So, everything was iPad based, phones and iPads and all that kind of stuff, and work with the kids down there. And her son was, at the time, was having some, I don't want to say behavioral problems. I don't know if that's the way to put it, but he was just really not into us, it seemed like at first. But over the course of this workshop that was 3 days, he kind of like warmed up, and was like, by the time we got to the end of it, he was way into it, right? And it's just like, this is so cool. And so anyway, I saw her just last week, and she said, I just wanted to let you know that my son is now majoring at film at Cal Poly Humboldt, and he says the reason he did that was because of the workshop that we did. Like it just, it turned on some sort of, light in him, and he just decided that, hey, this is something I want to pursue. And, I was floored by that. You don't get that kind of feedback really that often, and it just said to me that, the workshop that myself and Juan Carrillo, who's our production manager, did down there, it affected people, and it changed somebody's life, even if it was only one person, and that's a really good feeling, And so, me personally, I just try and start off with, how can we help? It's like a lot of the way I approach things. When somebody comes to me with something, it's like, okay, let's figure out how we can make this happen for you, and how you can realize what it is you want to realize, So that's a lot of our function, and I feel like, we should be moving more in that direction, which is supporting people who have an idea, they have the drive to do it, right? And then we fill in the gaps with the training and gear and just, the cheerleading, maybe, sometimes that's all people need is just like somebody say, good job, and yeah, go for it.
Just that support.
Yeah. And, in as I was talking about in the moving away from, how technology has moved on and everybody's got a television production in their pocket, that's kind of where we can feel, that's kind of where we can get into that point, because it's one thing to take video. It's another thing to render it out artfully and making it compelling for people to want to watch. And, my test when I talk to my students is like, the first question you have to ask yourself is it boring? You don't want it to be boring. You want it to be something that's going to engage somebody on some level, right? And either however you care to do it using, fancy camera angles or humor or, just information or what have you, So, but yeah, that's kind of like where I feel we should be going anyway.
Do you feel like you guys aren't going in that direction or weren't moving in that direction in the past? And that's a void you now see as important?
Well, it's not that I think that we're not moving in that direction. I think we are. But it was kind of a different model pre-COVID. Basically, anyone, and this is sort of still true, anyone could come in and sit in front of our computers for all the hours that we're open and never turn in any programming. I had members who rented cameras all the time and for years and never turned in a single program, right? And one of the reasons that we rent equipment and that we make editing stations available and that we have a television station is, first of all, for you to create what you want to create, right? And realize your dream. But secondly, it's not completely altruistic. We need content. We are content hungry. We've got 4 television channels, 24/7, 365.
It's a lot of air to fill.
That's right. Add it up, right? So one of the things that we want you to do when you use our equipment is to create content for the channels, right? So we had a fair amount of people that never did that. And I sometimes feel, and maybe that was important. Maybe we fulfilled a function, beyond what we saw as a zero sum, But I kind of feel like that people who have the drive and initiative and the ideas and everything, those are the people who should be higher up on the priority list, right? Than the people who just, kind of, this is going to sound terrible, but just kind of sort of take up that space that maybe somebody who really wants to create could be taking it, or take up the attention that we give to them. We should be giving to someone who, really is interested in realizing something,
Isn't just creating content in a vacuum.
Yeah. I mean, if for some people, if they were to create any content, I mean, it's like, again, there's no judgment on our part. We don't say, oh, this is good or bad. We're not looking at it and giving it a letter grade or anything else like that. It's just the fact that if you created it, if it's either create or don't create, right? If you're not creating something, then why? And what can we do? What can we do to help you figure out what it is you want to create? One of the things that would often happen would be people would come in with really grandiose plans. They would really have their version of War and Peace or whatever that they wanted to do. Apocalypse Now, we're going to blow up a village. We're going to do this, we're going to drive cars off of cliffs and, all that kind of stuff. And then when they got down to actually doing it, they realized 2 things. The first thing is, hey, this is actually work, right?
That's the big one.
There's actual work involved, right? And then the second thing is often that not everybody has your vision. If you're trying to attract people to help you do what you want to do, they may not be as, hot about it as you are, right? And so mostly it's the work. Mostly it's the fact that, hey, this is an involved thing. It just doesn't fall together. And I think people that watch a lot of media, I mean, we binge television now, right? We can watch an entire series, an output of a series in a single day, right? And people, I think there's a disconnect there because people don't say, they just think it magically appears, right? But each one of those episodes, they say they're an hour long, that involved a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of people working on it, and to pop that out. And then you've just gone through it in a single day. And you feel like, well, anybody can do that, right? It just falls together. And honestly, that's not the way it works. It really is hard. And so one of the things that, I try to impress upon people, in my classes is like, hey, let's look at the functions of what, television is. There's a producer and maybe an executive producer, and there's a director, and there's a production assistant, and there's an audio guy, and you may be all of them, right? You may be every one of those things, but it's important to know that they exist as separate jobs, right? So because somebody's got to do those jobs, right? And if it's only you, you've got
Buckle
only,
up. It's going to take a
yeah,
while.
exactly. So what I've seen over the years is just people that they're just overly ambitious, and they have good ideas. They got it all formulated in their heads, and stuff like that, and they think it should just pop out. And backing up to classes, we taught a studio class, and hopefully we'll get back to that soon. And so we would teach people how to run run the cameras and run the switcher and run the audio gear and mic people up and turn on the lights and make sure people are properly lit. But then, people would not get a chance to ever use those skills again, right? Unless they came back and did their own production. And, it's kind of like a muscle. I mean, you got to exercise.
Oh, you can lose it.
Yeah. You take a class and you're in the class for 4 hours, and then you come back 6 months later and it's like, oh, well, what am I supposed to do? So what we did is we had this thing called Media Lab that we did every 60 days that I would love to get back to. But what I tried to do was show people how a show could be produced, right? So we had a game show. We did a game show called Guess My Gig. And so we had there was a television show that you're too young to remember, I'm sure. It's called What's My Line, right? And basically people come in and they ask questions and try and figure out what people do for a living, right? Or what their hobby is and stuff like that. So we did a game show. We did an adult puppet show. We did an open mic type show. I've done like a Bob Ross painting show with a friend of mine who's a watercolorist, and we put all these shows together to show people what it takes, right, to produce a show. I mean, I even did a show where I said, you produce the show. I'll be the executive producer. I'll be your showrunner, and you be the showrunner. I'll be your executive producer, and you can find out what it takes to put a show together. Well, that didn't end particularly well. I ended up being the showrunner. I ended up, doing all that kind of stuff. But the idea is to, give people an idea what it takes to do a TV show. So I think that's important. I think it's important that people understand what's involved, right? Because I don't think a lot of people who could have the technology in their pocket now don't really understand what it takes, and that's where we can be helpful.
I agree, and don't understand that they could do it, that it is possible. There's no barrier of entry anymore, especially if you have that phone. You can create the content. It's just going to require a little bit of discipline, a little bit of patience, and a lot of hard work. But you can do it. You can create whatever you want to create today.
Yes, you can. There's really no barriers. There's so many low-cost, no-cost tools out there. There's really no excuse for and the knowledge too. The knowledge base is there as well. I mean, if we use a program called Final Cut Pro, which we use. That's our platform of choice for editing. There are so many tutorials online, right? You can just go. People ask us, well, do you have classes in Final Cut Pro?
You're like, yeah, it's called YouTube.
Well, it's called YouTube. It's also called doing it, right? It's also called just messing around with it, And one of the things I have a hard time sometimes with people doing is I've said, just do a 3-minute video. Just like go out and get some material, get your cat, do something about your cat, right? And don't try and start big, and just learn the tools and make your mistakes and see what worked and see what doesn't work. And so that's another one of my mantras is like start small. Figure it out. And, we're there to help. We're there to offer advice. But what we won't do is do it for you. Right? We unless you pay us.
People don't like that, though. They want to come and they want to know how to do it and be taught how to do it and then still have you do it for them.
Well, there's that. And, the other thing I find a lot is that people are afraid. They're afraid of the technology. They're afraid. I don't know where this comes from exactly. Jane, stop this crazy thing. They're afraid that they're going to mess something up. They're going to break something.
Okay.
And the thing with video editing nowadays is it's non-destructive. You really can't mess things up. You could delete. I guess you could delete your project, which people have done. But you could take, there are precautions for that. But there's really not. There's nothing to worry about. But I do find that people are worried that they're somehow going to break something, or there are gaps in their knowledge about basic sort of computer literacy. So I taught, and nothing against seniors, because I'm an old guy too, but I taught this class, an OLLI class, which is up at what was Humboldt State and now it's Cal Poly, video editing for seniors, right? And the seniors that I taught had no familiarity with shortcuts. So they didn't know Control-Z is undo. They didn't know Control-C was copy. They didn't know Control-V is paste, right? And so they're trying to do this stuff without that basic knowledge, right? And so it got really frustrating for them. So a lot of what I ended up doing in that class was teaching just basic computer literacy. These folks are of a certain era, they grew up in the pre-digital, pre-personal computer age, and that none of that was ever necessary. So they have gaps in their knowledge, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so there are, sometimes folks just don't want to admit that they don't know stuff, and it's embarrassing, or it's, they feel inadequate or what have you, and they're not. There's nothing wrong with not knowing that Control-V is paste, right? But there is something wrong with not wanting to, find out, so anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, other than to say that there are reasons why, even in today's world, there are, people that maybe have ideas and maybe want to do something, but they still just don't have those basic tools, in their toolkit to make it a reality.
What is the biggest factor limiting people from putting out that content? If they come see you and they start and they want to do it, is it their idea is too big, they don't know how to fulfill it, they get burnt out because of the workload? What stops that final creation aspect?
I mean, I think it's a case by case really basis. A lot of it is just people are busy, and they just get taken away from it. I know people that have started projects and then they just, life takes over, and, they started with the best of intentions, and then, something happens, and then they never come back to it, But I don't know. I mean, we try and make the barrier really low. As far as like renting gear from us, it's so cheap. I mean, we've talked about raising our rates and stuff like that. They've basically been the same since we started in 2006. It's just it's incredibly cheap to do. So it's not money. And the other thing about that is that even if it were a question of money, I will scholarship people. I will give them a membership. I will comp them the gear if they show that willingness and that drive and initiative to turn in some content, right? Now, we used to have a contract basically that said you will turn in content, you will, and here's the dates, and all this kind of stuff like that. We kind of got away from that because it just seemed like a little too authoritarian, and
it's a little aggressive.
Yeah, and we're nice people. We don't want to be busting people's chops. That's not what we're about. But getting back to what I was saying before, some people need their chops busted. Some people need that kick in the posterior to get them going. I do too. I mean, I sometimes usually I'm kicking myself in the ass, but sometimes you just need somebody to light a fire under you, and just remind you, hey, you committed to do this, and but I understand you got stuff going on, but let's try and figure it out. Let's reason together, and try and figure out what we need to do to get it happening.
What does it cost to rent some equipment? Is
There
a membership aspect where you can be a member and use it?
There is. So the membership for Access Humboldt is $25 a year.
It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, that's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, that's like, how many lattes is that?
And that gives you full access to all of your guys' equipment.
Gives you access to the editing facilities and also to the classes. So once you remember, then you can sign up for classes. So so to rent video gear, well, actually, and audio gear too, it's $5 a day, $10 for 3 days, $20 a week.
Oh, that's a great deal.
Yeah, it really is. And in addition to video kits, we also have podcasting kits. So if you wanted to, create a podcast, we have, a digital recorder, mics, mic stands, headphones, all that kind of stuff that you can set up, and do your own podcast like we're doing here today.
That's actually how I came across you and through Access Humboldt. Was I saw you guys were offering podcast classes on how to do that. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Yeah, I teach that class. I teach all of the classes. But yeah, we have that. We've gone through a couple different iterations of it, of the kits, but now I think we have a pretty solid kits for that kind of stuff, and it's really pretty easy. I went up and trained kids up at the Six Rivers Charter School up here in Arcata. And they turned out some great podcasts. They were journalism students, so they're already there, right? So they I have no responsibility other than just showing them, hey, this is how you plug this in, this is how you turn this on, that kind of thing, But so yeah, I'm a radio guy. I was at KHSU for a really long time. I had a show for over 20 years. There, and I also still have a show. I still have a radio show down at K-Mud, so I do a show down there. So I'm very big on radio, and I don't know. We haven't talked about radio yet, but we
have. That's a great segue.
Okay,
I want to kick that off with the censorship aspect though, because radio is definitely a little more heavy-handed.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, we have to work with the FCC. And the FCC says no 7 dirties, right? So, the George Carlin routine, you can't say these things on the radio, right? So that's our jumping off point for what goes on the radio. Secondly, I feel a little bit like I have a responsibility to give accurate information to as the station manager, I have a responsibility to give accurate information to the community. So, I've been approached by people who, are interested in, like, especially during COVID, that are interested in unproven and possibly unsafe, cures and preventatives, wanting to do shows about them. And I'm just like, show me the peer reviewed science and we're good, right? I am not going to put out things that confuse people. Right, that especially radio audiences tend to be a little older, and all that sort of thing, and they get conflicting information, right? So, so that's another thing is like if you're going to do a show on KZZH, you're going to need to be responsible and clear-eyed about what it is you're doing, There's plenty of other outlets. Like I've had to tell people, just take it to the TV side. Just, you could go over to our TV channels and you could say anything you want about anything you want, and that would be fine. We would never question that. But on the radio, I feel like I have a responsibility to the listeners of the station to give accurate information.
Do you ever struggle with that role of trying to determine what is accurate? I mean, especially with COVID, when the information was changing so fast.
Yeah.
Did you struggle with
Sure.
what is right and what is right for right now?
Absolutely. But, you can only rely on the experts, So like we had Dr. Hoffman on a lot, who is the public health officer for Humboldt County. And even he was going through this thing where it was a changing, moving target, and stuff like that. As we found out more about, I hear people complain about, well, people said XYZ about COVID when it first came out and it turned out not to be true. It's like, well, yeah, we didn't know anything about it, right? Nobody, or they did, but they really didn't have a good handle on what the disease was and how it was transmitted and all these other kinds of things and what would stop its transmission and, you know, vaccines and all that stuff. So it was kind of information developed as you went along, you know. So, but yeah, so we just tried to rely on the experts, you know. We just try and get the people who, you know what they're talking about, you know, or they should know what they're talking about. They're in a position which says that they know what they're talking about. Was that always 100% accurate? I'm sure you could probably ask them and they would say, hey, well, we didn't know this in February, what we knew in March, right? So, you know, you can just do the best you can. I mean, that's really all you can do. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really been put in a position more than a couple of times about, you know, like, here's my, you know, theory about XYZ and why won't you put it on the radio? That hasn't really happened that much. You know, maybe it will as we start to, you know, kind of gather steam and get to be well known. It's, you know, it's been kind of a hard slog to get like any media attention from our fellow media people. Have not fallen over themselves to, like, you know, put a shining spotlight on us that much. But yeah, you know, one of the things that, you know, one of the reasons the radio station got started in the first place was that, you know, to get public meetings, to participate in your democracy, you had to have cable television or you had to have a broadband hookup. You know, so we started the station with the idea that, hey, we'll put on public meetings, we'll put them on the radio, so anybody with a transistor radio that's in our listening area can listen to it, right? And so that was our jumping off point for that. And then we moved into things like when we were on the campus of Eureka High School, we were doing student voices. So we work very closely over the years with the media production class, which is sadly no longer there. Because, you know, that's the way they do things over there. But so we had student voices. So we had, you know, kids developing their own voices, you know, podcasting and interviewing each other and just trying stuff out. And we put that stuff on the radio. And, you know, and so it has moved into, and then in 2016, the university gutted KHSU and really deprived the community of a huge resource. There was a lot of public affairs, local public affairs programming that just got wiped off the face of the earth, right? Just thrown in the trash can. And so at that point, one of the things that I made my reason for being was to try and bring a lot of that back. And we have succeeded in doing that, you know. So we have things like Eco News, and we have we developed a community calendar, which was a really important piece of their day, and various other shows. And in fact, I'm bringing back a show called Thursday Night Talk, which is a talk show that was on for, you know, 35 years on KHSU, you know. So we tried to make it a home for people that were doing public affairs programming. So that came into play. And so that, you know, kind of led to us accepting programming from other people, from like podcasters and, you know, people that are just developing their own stuff, you know. So that's kind of where we are today is we I'm always looking for content. I mean, people like see me coming and it's like, oh, here he comes again. He's going to ask me to be on the radio or something, you know. But, you know, again, I have 24/7 to fill, and I got a schedule to fill, and, you know, I need stuff to go in there. You know, it's just a plain fact that I got to fill out a 24-hour broadcast day. Right. So, so I'm always looking for people that might want to, do radio shows. And, you know, this move to CR has been really fortuitous in that respect, because there's a whole new group of people that we can call upon, you know.
And a younger
generation. Academy of the Redwoods, you know, is up there. Their high school outlet, you know. So, yeah, so there's a whole new bunch of people I can bug, you know, for content.
Now, with the radio, you said the seven deadly words, seven
dirty
C's,
words. Yeah,
seven dirty words.
Yeah.
What is that?
You want me to recite them?
Yeah.
I think it's shit, fuck, piss, motherfucker, cocksucker. How's that 6? And tits. Tits is.
You can't say tits on the
I
radio.
guess not. Oh, piss. Did I say piss? So that's 7. Yeah.
So those are the only 7 words you can't say on the radio?
Yeah. Those are the ones that are the hot button words. Although I hear people say pissed off all the time. And of course there's the bird called the tit. So what happens when you say that? Does the wheels fall off of the thing? I don't know. But yeah, basically we just want to avoid F-bombs.
Now why that? Why was the line drawn there? That's the $1 million question.
Yeah,
right?
Community standards. I think it was Justice Stevens who said, I don't know what obscenity is, but I know it when I see it, right? And so there was this case that George Carlin versus the FCC, where he tested that theory, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court about what was considered unsuitable for broadcast. Again, that's kind of gone by the wayside. I mean, if you look at like our former president, who said all kinds of crazy stuff on live into a mic, I don't think he got fined or anything else like that. But yeah, so those are things. What you don't want to do, I think, as a broadcaster is just attract unwarranted attention. Somebody could complain about it, and, then you would have people investigating you and trying to figure out, if you know what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. And they might find out that you don't know what you're doing. But
story of my life.
Yeah. So we want to studiously avoid those sorts of things. And then again, libeling and slandering. Libel is printing, and slander is broadcast or saying out loud, I think. I might have that backwards. I probably do. But yeah, you want to, that's another thing you want to avoid. You don't want to say, Joe Jones beats his wife, or, that kind of stuff. You
just make shit up.
Yeah, just make shit up, which I guess is a whole industry now. It's been an industry for a while.
It's definitely
actually
popularized now.
Yeah. There's a lot of money in that, by the way. So just for your
I'll
listeners,
start taking some
for your
notes.
listeners out there, if they're looking for a new career, they could get into making shit up. But so we don't.
You gotta watch out for that.
We got to watch out for that. The other biggie is hourly IDs. We need to tell the folks that they're listening to KZZH 96.7 Eureka, California.
You have to say that.
Have to say that every hour. It's a violation if you do not.
Now, why is that a factor?
Well, I think
is that
it's
in
a practice.
case you say something bad, people know who.
Well, yeah, yes, and I think that's part of it. But I think that they, I think it's useful actually to know that. It's a useful bit of information where you're listening to something, you hear a program that you really like, and what station was that? So KZZH. But yeah, I think it is that you identify yourself and you take responsibility for what you're putting out. So I think that's why. That's a very old. That goes back to the 1930s. So that they've been doing that for a long time. But yeah, that's one of the things that you can get a violation for. Is not.
That's so crazy. I mean, it just seems so arbitrary. Do you see the FCC loosening some of these rules because radio is now competing with the internet and anything goes TV is as well. Everything's competing with the internet, and the internet has no gloves.
Well, what I see is that the enforcement arm of the FCC has been gutted, right? So it almost, in some ways, it doesn't matter it matters what people do, but I mean, it's harder for them to, keep right herd on it, really, I think more.
But they still have the option to enforce.
They still have those regulations are still on the books. There was a Digital Copyright Act. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Was sometimes known as the Sonny Bono Act. I don't know, Sonny and Cher. I don't know. I'm drawing a
Sonny
blank.
And Cher, yeah.
I'm drawing a blank look. But Sonny Bono was a congressman from California for a long time. Died by skiing into a tree. But anyway, he shepherded this thing through this horrendous bill. It's one of the reasons why we're so big on not putting copyrighted material on, because that's a violation as well of that act. And and in fact, when I was at KHSU, they would not let us play more than 3 songs in a row of the same artist, because that violated the Digital Copyright Act. So like if somebody died and you wanted to do a tribute to someone, you could not play 3 of their songs in a 4-hour period.
A 4-hour period?
4-hour period, yeah. So, yeah. So there's been some crazy stuff, coming out of Congress, mostly by people that came from a generation that didn't understand. This is the Napster era, right? This is when, MP3s and that sort of thing, and just got started, and this is long before anybody dreamed of, the music services that we have now. And people didn't really understand, how this whole thing worked, there was one joke about, somebody said something about turning on the internet, or how do you turn it on, or whatever, where's the switch, but the laws were made by people like this, right? That didn't really understand. And so what they had was a lot of industry flacks that had their own, just like, that's how the sausage gets made today. They come in and write legislation and hand it off to them and say, hey, enact this as a law, and so you get a lot of crazy stuff, I don't know that anybody obeys that rule anymore, the 3-song rule. I forget who passed away, but I did down on my show and came out, I did maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I did a show where I played like an hour of, somebody's music. I don't know what's wrong with that. I don't know why that would be bad, but because the thing is nowadays, and even back then, I mean, you could just go out and get, they were still concerned with home taping. So you probably even haven't heard this phrase, but there used to be a lot of the music companies like Warner and the big music companies at the time had this whole home taping is killing the music industry. So when I say home taping, that's like making a mixtape with a cassette, right? Or copying your LP to a cassette so you can listen to it in your car, instead of going out and buying that cassette, right? So that was the impetus for all of that. They didn't want people to tape 3 songs of Bob Dylan off the radio, right? Because that would kill the music industry, or so they said.
Meanwhile, here's Spotify and Apple Music.
Right. This is pre-Spotify. This is all.
Cassettes.
Yeah. Like I said, Napster, which that was like the first one that did that, and they definitely did not pay royalties. They just you could rip anything from anywhere and stick it up there, and people could then copy it and put it on their computer and have it on their hard drive. I mean, they prosecuted people for having music on their hard drive, and that was not that long ago. That was probably 10 or 12 years ago. They would raid somebody, right? I remember reading about them raiding some guy who had like 3,000 songs on his hard drive, and hauling the poor slob off to jail because he's a scofflaw and he's killing music, somehow by having these songs on his computer,
Well, that's a tale as old as time. The idea that lawmakers aren't up to date on 90% of what they're making laws about. My biggest gripe with that today is privacy in social media. The laws that they make they're outdated at the time of signing. They don't do anything tangible.
Yeah. Well, it's just all industry-driven legislation.
It's money-driven.
Yeah.
Who's got the deepest pockets?
Right. And these lobbyists are literally handing lawmakers, model legislation, they call it, right? And, this is what we'd like to see in a bill. And by the way, here's $2,500 for your re-election campaign.
Yeah.
Not connected to us asking for this model legislation.
Yeah, this is just on the side. We want this in addition, but this money's really for you, for your campaign.
So you get some kind of crappy legislation out of that, right? Or you get legislation that suits moneyed interests, that suits people who've got a, that really have a dog in the fight, So, and not necessarily, benefit the average citizen, So again, like you said, it's a story as old as, time, I'm sure back in the Senate in Rome, there was probably, hey, Claudius,
Same thing going
I
on.
got some olive leaves, Can you help me out?
Grease some palms.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite medium then? Do you prefer the radio, even though there is that restriction, but it's not as heavy-handed, or do you like the open access of the internet or cable?
Well, I got to say I'm a radio guy. I mean, I was always fascinated by the fact that this just, the voices came into your house for free, and I can remember as a kid, listening to a transistor radio with it turned down really low and having it under my pillow and like listening to stuff late into the night and just being super fascinated with it. So I do come out of that, but I'm an all platforms person. I mean, the stuff that I produce for all platforms. And I think everybody should be doing that, right? The podcasters there should be a video component that you can put up on YouTube, or you can put on Vimeo, or you can, do whatever put it in some other sharing medium, So I start off from a radio background. Like I said, did radio and TV production in college, had a college radio, and then 20 plus years at KHSU. But I did do some commercial. I subbed for Mike Dronkers, who used to be down at K Hum for a few times. Did commercial radio and got a taste of that, And I mean, there's a place in the world for that kind of for commercial radio. But I really have long been focused on non-commercial radio. I think it's just really important, that whole voice of the people and access and all that kind of stuff, So
Well, that seems to fit right in with Access Humboldt as well. I mean, you're still in that same field.
Yeah, we're still heading in that direction. And even though I won't take anything for the radio station, I'll take almost anything. I'm not going to go look at it and say, well, this is not something that I'm interested in, so I'm not going to put it on the radio, because there are people that will be interested in it, right? And I want to get people on that platform if that's what they want to be. Now, there are a lot of young people that don't even own radios, right? They don't even, they have a car that's got one, and they like, what's this thing? That's my Bluetooth machine, right? But there are still people that, why I think radio is valuable, or it's been valuable to me, is that it's a multitasking sort of thing, whereas things that are on video, on television, or on YouTube or whatever, it takes up your entire attention. But things like podcasting and radio shows, and really a podcast is really a radio show without the transmitter, right? Without the tower. You can garden, or you can, do a craft, or you can, hang out on your deck and
do anything.
You can do anything while that's all happening, and you still get the benefit of that, So that's, to me, that's kind of the beauty of it, But I do love all these other things. I have a podcast that I do with Bandon Wayne, who runs the works here in Eureka. It's called Low Pass Filter. Shameless plug. I got my shameless plug in, which is a show about music, and we never hear any music, but we talk about music, and so that's a television show or an internet show, and it's also designed to be on the radio and designed to be on like Internet Archive and stuff. You can listen to it as a podcast, a straight podcast. So again, that's that whole all platforms thing.
Now, did you have any gripes with podcasts when they first came on the scene? Because that seemed to be a big tension between radio guys and those underground podcasts when it first started.
Not really. I mean, it's a creative medium, and I'm behind people who create. I like to think of myself as a creative person. I'm a musician. I do art, and stuff like that. So anything that's creative, anything that's an outlet for people, to me, I think that's valid and valuable, right? I mean, it didn't take away from us as a station. I don't really feel, and in fact, it's opportunities, right? So if again, if you have a podcast that you think would work on the radio, I want to hear about it, right? So it doesn't just have to be a podcast. It's great if it is. It's, that's fine. But you could also share it with a whole different audience who maybe would never think of listening to a podcast and wouldn't even know how, right? And so that's one of the cool things. So I never looked at it, no, as like it was something that was a competition or anything else like that.
It's all just exposure. It's all just putting out what you enjoy and hoping other people can find that.
Yeah, and it's frankly, it's a pretty low bar technology-wise to do, really.
Oh, podcasts especially. Yeah, you could just do it on your phone.
You could do it on your phone. I mean, I suggest this to people all the time. You could do it with Zoom.
Which people do.
Which I produce television shows using Skype.
I had Eric on. Eric, I'm drawing a blank on his last name.
Eric Black?
No, Eric, he does the Redwood Wonk. I just had him on yesterday.
Eric Kirk.
Kirk. I was drawing a blank on his last name.
Yeah.
And he was using Skype.
Yes. Yep.
How easy is that?
Yeah,
you just need a computer.
That's a show that's a show I produce.
Yeah, he was telling me about you.
Yeah. The reasons I use Skype is very weird, and it's kind of idiosyncratic, and I'm not sure it's super well supported anymore. But the one beauty of it is you can get cameras. So if because I cut back and forth, I'll use the interface, but I'll also cut back and forth the cameras. It's harder to do with Zoom. So, and the audio seems to be a little bit better most of the time. But yeah, I mean, for somebody who wants to do a podcast, and let's say you have no gear, let's say you just have a laptop, all you have to do is just do a Zoom session with your friend and record it, right? And then if you wanted to go on and do you could do get Audacity, which is a free audio editor that I suggest everyone get, because
that's what we're on right now.
Oh, right on.
It's Audacity.
Yeah. I use Audition at work, but I teach Audacity to people, so. But that's free. That's 100% free. It's ad free. It's and they update it. It's really amazing and amazingly powerful. But it also just does the small stuff, right? It also just cuts heads and tails off, right? It just or takes out a bad word or moves something around, So it's at its minimum. You can really. There are other tools too, but I mean It's amazing that's something that you have. I mean, I was a recording engineer for 10 years, and we used razor blades. I would do commercials for people, and we would cut in voiceovers using a aluminum block and pieces of tape and razor blades, right? And the fact that you can do this right on your desktop computer is amazing, and have in half the time and completely accurately and with complete fidelity, So yeah, there's the entry to doing podcasts is really pretty low, and really again it just comes back to wanting to do it and having the drive and just finding it important.
I've had a lot of people on here that have talked about wanting to start their own, and I'm always like, yeah, you should do it.
All the kids are doing it.
I don't know if anybody has started though. They all talk about wanting to do it.
This gets back to my whole thing that I was talking about before, about people that have grandiose plans and they want to do stuff, and they would really, they have good ideas and they really want to do something, but they just can't bring themselves to pull the trigger, and not to go too deeply philosophical or anything.
Oh,
but
we can go deep.
But us as human beings, I get this pointed out a lot. And why wait? Don't wait around, because you just don't know if, you or whoever you wanted to talk to, say, is going to be here tomorrow. We, up at Keat, we did a series, talked to tribal elders, and we talked to people that had been in the community for a really long time. It's called Living Biographies. It was produced by a guy named Jan Kreppelin. And if we had waited, in some cases, if we had waited, a couple of months, their voices would have been silent forever, When you die, it's the big silence, right? You're not talking, you're not. So if you, do it now. Carpe diem, I hate that
Seize the
phrase,
day.
but really, what are you waiting for? That exactly what are you waiting for? Just get out there and do it. And people they self-sabotage and they prevaricate around the bush and and then they end up not doing it. And I think people have regrets about that. And that's another thing you don't want to have is regrets, So, do it now, do it now.
What's the worst that can happen?
Well, exactly. And here's the other thing is like people think, well, I'll fail or it'll be bad or whatever, but that's learning, the only way you get good at anything is by trying it out and learning from your mistakes, and you're like, well, I won't do that again, or I like that bit. So I'm going to bring that bit back and I'm going to use that all the time now, so that's how you find things that are super cool, right? It's by making mistakes and trying it. And the old thing about, if you want to have an omelet, you got to break some eggs, right? So if you're listening to me, if you're within the sound of my voice, get out there and do it. Don't wait. And we can show you how at Access Humboldt. We can give you the tools, and we can.
And for $25 a year.
For $25 a year, the classes are a little bit more than that. The classes are $40. But one of the cool things about the classes that we give, once we get back to giving them, is that you could take them as many times as you want. So if you took a class and you didn't understand XYZ or you just need a refresher or something, you can come back and take it again for free.
Do you record the classes as well and put them out?
No, I haven't done to this up until this point. It kind of makes me it would kind of make me redundant, But really, with the way things are going, maybe that might be a good thing. Especially like we used to give an orientation class, which is just basically an introduction to Access Humboldt. Talked about some of the, our policies like we've been talking about today, and why, putting it out there is important and all that kind of stuff. That could be recorded. I think that could easily be something that people could just like webinar, watch it on their own, and it doesn't necessarily. But the thing about that, about not doing it live, is that's a chance for interaction, right? So that's a chance for us to interact with you, to figure out what it is that you want to do, and so that can be really important. So there's something to be said for doing them live, I think.
There's definitely that human interaction there that is valuable.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that exposure seemed to be kind of an issue for Access Humboldt, and that your media peers weren't exactly uplifting. Is that a competition thing?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, we do a show with North Coast Journal called North Coast Journal Preview. I produce that show as well. And they have been really great. We do a weekly show with them, and we talk about what's in the journal, and that's terrific. I really love Jen and Thad. They're just fun, and interesting, right? So, and that's part of what we call our news block. So we have twice a day on weekdays. We try and get news, do a news. We don't have a news department, so we don't do, but we aggregate. Okay, so there we are.
Full circle.
Yeah, we aggregate some news sources, and that's one of them. But yeah, it just seems like we just don't get any. I don't know. We just don't get any exposure. We opened our community media center, and nobody did a story about it. Right when we moved down to CR, nobody said. But there's just a lack of curiosity on some people's parts about it, So I guess that's okay. I mean, it sounds like I'm complaining and whining. Maybe
it sucks in the aspect that it's the community that loses out.
Yeah,
because they're the ones that can take advantage of what you guys are offering.
Yeah, it would be nice. And the experience that I often had and still do have at Access Humboldt is like, I would people would come in to do something with somebody who like to shoot something with a member or something like that, and they'd walk around going, I had no idea this was here. I had no idea. I had seniors at Eureka High School who would come in for something. We did this thing for another show I produced called Community Voices. We had Jared Huffman and Paul Bersu, who was
He's the host of Community Voice.
Yes,
I've watched a few of those. Yeah.
He is a legendary civics teacher.
I had him as a teacher for AP.
Yeah, people loved him, and he was just like a different kind of teacher, right? He's a different kind of guy. He's a beautiful man, but he's not like, let's open our textbooks, right? It's more like, well, what happened in the news today, and let's talk about it.
Oh,
right?
He can get rolling.
Yeah,
yeah.
But he had his some of his seniors come and ask questions of Jared Huffman, and a number of them said, I've been going here 4 years and I had no idea that this was here. I had no idea any of this was here, right? And, it's not from our lack of trying. It's not from our trying to put it out there. They have these things called link tours. I don't know when you went there, when you went from junior high school to high school.
I was a link leader, yeah.
Yeah. So,
and to be fair, I didn't know you guys were there throughout my duration.
Because they never put us on the tour. And so Sean and I would go out and hijack the groups of kids, and say, come on in here, we got candy, whatever, come in and check out the place, just to try and, so people would know, and just say, hey, look, as you go through your academic life here, that was one of the things about being at Eureka High School was the studio was dedicated to students during the day, right? They always had first call on so if they wanted to do an assignment for history or whatever they were doing, they always had first call on the gear there, right? So, but their kids that went through high school never knew that any of that existed, so it's a struggle, even with people that are, supposedly your allies, I mean, they've got other priorities. I understand they've got a business to run, or they've got a school to, build a new multi-million-dollar gym on, or whatever, they're doing. So I understand that their concerns are not necessarily our concerns and stuff like that. But when you have a resource like that, it just really seems like a huge waste to not avail yourself of it, or at least know that it's there, and you could avail yourself of it if it was of some use to you. I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to come to an Access Humboldt and do stuff, but it could potentially be useful somehow. So
is that what happened with EHS? Was a sort of allocation of resources that they no longer wanted to provide?
Well, I don't want to go too deeply into that whole thing, but I'll just say that they talked a pretty good game about us being important to them, but I didn't really pencil out. And then when COVID hit, they kept the media program going for a while, but after people started coming back to school, then they killed the media program, media production program. So we kind of became redundant, I think, at that point. I shouldn't talk about what I think about education and how people conduct themselves in education, but it just seems like a lot of it is really edifice education. It's like, let's build stuff, whereas things like, they got rid of the school newspaper, there was a media club on campus, and they couldn't get an advisor for it. Well, part of that was, teachers paid for, and I'm down with that. That's completely. But I offered to be the advisor, for the media club, but they wouldn't do that either, So there was just sort of a lack of commitment, I think, to what we do. And I also think this whole thing about not completely understanding, the value of it. I mean, to me, and this is my elevator speech that I would give to. At some point in your working life, there's a pretty good chance that you might be asked to put together something, right? You might be asked to run a Facebook page that includes stuff like video. You might be asked to do a video about a company that you work for or what have you. And boy, wouldn't it be great to have that, those chops before you have to do it, right? And at least know that you could do it. If somebody asked you, in a job interview, hey, could you put together a podcast about our beauty products, and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I learned that at school in media production and Access Humboldt, but I don't really think that people completely understand that. I mean, there's, and then there's also the whole thing that's everything is college track, it's just like, so things like the arts and music and,
it all takes a hit.
Yeah, it all takes a hit. Yeah. Fortunately they still have a music program. Fortunately they still have a theater program, Nan Voss. Awesome. I mean,
shout out to Nanette. I did a play there and she directed us. She's fantastic.
Yeah, I just did a kind of as my parting gift to Eureka High School and to Nan and everybody. They just did Once Upon a Mattress, the play Once Upon a Mattress musical, and so I did. I videotaped the whole thing and made it, so like you could, watch the whole thing from beginning to end. And because it's copywritten, they just gave it to like parents and students and stuff like that. So it wasn't like you could, get it widely. But I also did this behind the scenes thing, which I was there at rehearsals for a while and, just kind of put together what it took for like Nan and the kids and stuff to put the show together. It's just like kind of a fly on the wall at a production. And that was kind of my gift to Eureka High School because they did host us for all those years. And, that's a thing, that is a valuable thing. And, I don't want to sound like I'm talking disparagingly about them because, they gave us a home for a long time and, it was a good home and, all things must end. And in some ways, like I was talking about leaving Keat, that was at the time it seemed like a tragedy, right? But it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, really. If I had stayed there, I would never have gotten to do all the things that I've gotten to do. And I kind of feel like if they hadn't have not renewed our lease, shall we say, that we wouldn't be at CR. We wouldn't be in this really fabulous facility now. We wouldn't have all the opportunities that I think we're going to have to work with the people on CR. To this morning, just as an example, this morning I've been in talks with them about broadcasting the CR football games, the home games.
That would be cool.
I think it's going to be cool. We need to find some money if anybody out there wants to underwrite CR football on the radio. So, but anyway, we were up at the Redwood Bowl, which also sadly has no football. The HSU football or Cal Poly football team is no longer a thing anymore. So they have this big, beautiful empty stadium up there. So CR is going to be playing their home games up there while their stadium is being renovated. But anyway, so this is one of the things that we're working on doing is bringing that to to our listeners, and we also stream. We have a you can stream us. So like people whose kids are playing in football games can if they're down in LA or if they're in Ohio or wherever they can tune in. So these are opportunities that we wouldn't have had if we had still been at Eureka High School.
I think it's a better move. I think it'll pan out to be, if it's not already. I think CR will be a better spot, especially with you might lose some of the community members that would go to EHS. They might not travel that far, but I think the college atmosphere at CR will be better suited. I think those kids will actually take advantage of the resources.
And these kids are, for the most part, they're adults.
Yeah.
So that's
we keep saying kids. They're my age or younger, but in, late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
And they might be more inclined to actually produce something.
They've got the energy. They got the drive. Yeah. They have the ideas. I ran into a young lady who's doing work study program. She was out like trimming the bushes and stuff out in front of our thing, and she's like, "Oh, well, what's going on in there?" And so I started to explain to her what Access Humboldt is, and I was telling her about the podcasting classes, and she says, we have this podcast that we can't seem to finish. She's in a forestry student, right? And I'm like, we would love to have that. Let us know how we can help you realize it. I mean, they had stuff recorded, and they just haven't gone the final. The last little push to put it out. It's like, we're here, and you call on us.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah. And one of the things that we want to do is be helpful. We want to help CR in its mission, and the students there in their mission. Which was what we attempted, and I think sometimes succeeded at doing at Eureka High School. That was our aim, was to help them, their educational career, be more enhanced and a better thing. And we are definitely that's what we want to do at CR, is just be as helpful as possible, and try and help them achieve their goals.
Yeah, CR gets a lot of slack, and I don't know if that's just the local atmosphere towards it, like from kids that are looking at colleges. I feel like there's an air of, oh, you don't want to go to CR, but it's a great community college. I mean, the teachers there, the resources are really fantastic.
First of all, it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, the campus itself is amazing.
I happen to live on the up above CR on the hill.
Oh, so you've got the view up there.
I can walk to work.
How nice is that?
It's pretty cool. But like I shouldn't denigrate kids at Eureka High School, but they can be boisterous and kind of a little out of control.
Well,
sometimes.
They're high schoolers.
They are high schoolers.
Yeah.
And with COVID, they're actually junior high schoolers. So because they haven't been to school in 2 years. But anyway, when I would leave or go outside, it would usually be students, screaming obscenities at the top of their lungs, and then when I go outside at CR, it's like a doe and two fawns, like noshing on the grass, So it is kind of a different vibe, I guess I would say. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I can't say enough about Keith Flamer, who's the college president, who really has been welcoming and just really affirming on all the stuff that we want to do. And I think he has the vision thing. I think he understands the value. Of course, he's on our board,
which helps.
It does help. Yeah.
He's got that inside look of, okay, this makes a difference.
Yeah. So it helps, to have somebody at the top who's behind the concept.
Yeah, it's always nice to have somebody on your side in a position like that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they got you.
And he's a great guy. He's really a super nice man. A really nice man. Yeah.
All right, well, Matt, we can wrap this up.
Okay.
We've been putting in some time here. Do you want to plug again where people can find you, where they can find your podcast, Access Humboldt, all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So accesshumboldt.net. So everything's there. That's our webpage. We also, there's kzzh.accesshumboldt.net. That's the radio station page. And you can call us at 707-476-1798. That's our phone number. And if you wanted to get a hold of me, my email is pretty easy. It's my first name, Matt, M-A-T-T, at accesshumboldt.net. And I just encourage people to come down and take a look, and see what we have to offer. And I just had a lady in yesterday who wants to do podcasting, and she's got a broadcasting thing. And I sat down and we went through audition, and I showed her how to do it. And she basically levitated when she left the place. Oh my gosh, I can do this! It's like, oh my, just the realization, So hopefully we can help people realize what they want to realize.
Yeah, I think it's great. I've said it again, or I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the resource you guys provide is important. And I think the ability for community members to just take advantage of that, and the low barrier of entry is just fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you. I had a great time, man.
Thanks.